21-year-old Caitlin Markham lived in Fairfield, Indiana. Described as a little eccentric and very creative, thoughtful, and an all-around sweet person. She was a talented artist and had gravitated towards that since childhood. You could often find her with a paintbrush in her hair looking for something to create. In 2011, she was a graphic art student at the Art Institute of Ohio, Cincinnati, and in her spare time she worked in a local bridal shop. She and her fiancé, John Carter, had been together for about 6 years, engaged for 1, and had recently been making plans to move in together in Colorado. He too was very arty and taught glassblowing.
Believe it or not, I actually started here by delivering a pizza.
Oh, yeah?
And I asked to volunteer my time, which became an internship I did for about 9 months.
Wow.
And this is my career. I love it.
Wow. It's beautiful.
In August 2011, Caitlin was just days off of her 22nd birthday, weeks away from graduating, months away from moving away and getting married. There was a lot of big and exciting things on the horizon for her. So when she stopped responding to everyone abruptly, and her phone was going straight to voicemail, it was unexpected to say the least. Her fiancé John went to her house after a day of no one hearing anything. He found her car parked outside, but she would normally be at the bridal shop at this time. There was no sign of anyone inside, no sign of a forced entry either, and nothing looked out of place or broken. Her cell phone appeared to be missing too, and her dog was just roaming around alone, which was obviously alarming. At 8 p.m. on August 14th, John called 911.
Hi, my name is John Carter. I am calling. I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person before 24 hours, but my fiance is missing. I can't find her anywhere.
Okay, where did you see her last?
I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in a house by herself, so I'm really nervous. Her car is still there.
Where was she at midnight last night when you left?
She was at her house. She was going to bed. She wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. And I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't.
Okay, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything?
Not at all. The only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there, and it's just kind of... I'm sorry.
He explained that he had last seen her around midnight the night before, as he was leaving her townhouse. He lived with his mom just a 5-minute walk away. John said they exchanged a few texts, but a few hours later, Caitlin had stopped responding and didn't reply to his good morning text either. The police met with him, and the first thing they noticed were some scratches on his neck, but he explained that it was just from his electric razor, but then admitted he wasn't actually sure, but it was nothing nefarious. He said he was losing sleep over his fiancée being missing and just wanted her home safe and well. She was very close to her father Dave and her younger sister Allie, and neither of them had any clue either. Dave said she's positive, outgoing and motivated. She had a plan and she was sticking to it. She would never just leave. She's just too pragmatic. Detectives said after intense scrutiny, John was not a person of interest at that time, and their attention was moving elsewhere.
Well, Lisa, you can see Fairfield Police and Fire have their mobile command center out here. About 100 people have gathered off Patterson Boulevard. They all received several of these with Caitlin Markham's picture and information. They've searched the woods, the streets, all looking for the 22-year-old.
Caitlin is the love of my life. I've been with her for 6 years. We've been engaged for a year. Today would be exactly a year. Today's also her birthday.
Instead of celebrating Caitlin Markham's birthday, family, friends, and police are searching for the 22-year-old.
5 more.
They divided into groups and hit Fairfield streets by foot, by car, and even by ATV.
Just go unseen without telling anybody is extremely out of the ordinary. I just really would like to communicate that this is not part of who Caitlin is.
Friends say Caitlin is a responsible young woman, a student at the Art Institute of Cincinnati, also an employee there. Caitlin was last seen by her fiancé, John Carter, Saturday night. He says he left her townhouse around 11:30. About an hour later, he received a text from her.
Caitlin sent me a picture of her, and that was the last message I got.
When Caitlin never showed up for her other job at David's Bridal, people began to worry.
I kept texting her, no response, no response. I call her, no response. I have nothing in mind. She would never just leave. She's too pragmatic. She would never just take off and go somewhere. I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I just want to find Caitlin and celebrate her birthday with her and go to Red Lobster like she was planning. That's all I want to do.
Police say there's no evidence of foul play. Reporting live tonight in Fairfield, Karen Johnson, News 5.
Gosh, her fiancé sounds so desperate, Karen. Anything missing from Caitlin's home?
Nope, just her and her cell phone, which police have not been able to trace. But one other thing I wanted to mention, they believe she was last seen wearing a gray shirt, so that's something people out here are also looking for, a gray shirt.
Her phone had so far not been found, so they focused on data from her phone provider. Texts were sent from her phone to John's from 11:04 p.m. to 11:36 p.m. But just as he had said, there was nothing after that. At 12:06 a.m, her phone had either been turned off, or the battery had died, or the SIM card was removed. That was where everything went cold. Police interviewed the manager of GE Credit Union in Fairfield, who said Caitlin had come into the union 3 weeks before her disappearance. July 20th, 2011, she was with John's mother. Caitlin had told the manager she wanted to apply for a credit card and John's mom would co-sign for it. The manager said John's mom joked, "I'll co-sign for the visa, but you've got to take my son to Colorado with you," to which the manager turned to Caitlin laughing and said, "I guess you're stuck now." The manager remembered that Caitlin didn't laugh back. She seemed somber and more serious. It felt like perhaps the credit card was not her idea. That being said, the card was not set up in the end and nothing else came of it. Another person also told police he was with Caitlin and John on the night of August the 13th, and that the three of them had smoked some weed and, quote, discussed Caitlin and John's plans to move to Colorado within the next few months. The witness said Caitlin was on her laptop working on schoolwork. She didn't move from the couch and, in his words, seemed distant and not her typical bubbly self. He left her townhouse at around 10:45 p.m, leaving her and John alone. He said it was the last time he had seen Caitlin, and nothing really stood out apart from her being a bit quiet. He also didn't recall seeing any scratches on John at that time, but he admitted it was also entirely possible he wasn't even paying attention enough to remember. Polygraph tests are of course not admissible and cannot be used in court, but the witness did offer to take one, which indicated he gave truthful responses. In the overnight hours between August 13th and August 14th, a couple of teenagers who had snuck out told police they had seen two cars driving from the direction of Caitlin's house, with their headlights off, but they seemed to be the only people to have seen anything, and apart from that, the police really had nothing to go off.
Caitlin Markham, the woman missing from Fairfield.
21-year-old Caitlin Markham.
Family and friends are all searching for a missing 22-year-old.
Caitlin was about to graduate in September.
Markham disappeared in August of 2011.
Volunteers spent days searching for Markham in the woods in and around her Fairfield
Still
home.
so many unanswered questions about the disappearance.
Before long, Caitlin's case was national news. The case had really shocked Fairfield. It was a community of about just over 40,000 residents, and violent crime was very rare. Vigils, rallies, TV appeals, and volunteers were out all hours of the day and night. It was a huge search and a huge mystery. Even a national mounted search group from Texas conducted dozens of searches, combing through the local parks, waterways, old train tracks, and areas in neighbouring counties. Caitlin's family were making every plea they could and were regular faces in the local media, as was her fiancé John.
I keep believing that if she is somewhere in the worst case scenario, that she fights her way out. I keep wanting to believe that because she's strong. I know she's strong.
There were most definitely still some eyes on John, but he was adamant he had nothing to do with anything.
Fairfield police didn't take much when they searched Caitlin's fiance's house. Tonight, he says he gave consent. He's doing whatever he can to help, even though he feels as if the entire community is pointing fingers and placing blame on him.
I really did not want this to get this far. I really wish that she would have been home by now, you know. I wish this could have been just a party for her being home instead of what it is, you know. People are going to say what they're going to say. You can't stop them.
23-year-old John Carter may not be able to stop the comments, but he can certainly make sure that people know how he feels.
I'm not going to acknowledge the ridiculous things that people are saying because I know, I mean, nobody's going to know about me. They don't know me, and I know me. I know that I would never hurt Caitlin, ever, in a million years.
Fairfield police have little evidence and no suspects.
That's pretty much it. There's nothing, and it's horrific.
Carter felt the animosity towards him when he was confronted while passing out flyers.
I guess he didn't know who I was, and he was just like, I heard the boyfriend did it, and I was just like, I'm the boyfriend. I would never do anything to hurt her.
And while the days without Caitlin continue, he finds comfort in her cat Ramsey and her artwork.
A short while later, it was Caitlin's 22nd birthday, but there was no time to focus on how sad that day felt. It was still all hands on deck. At this point, to the frustration of Caitlin's family, the Fairfield police were still saying there was no indication of foul play. John spoke very fondly of their relationship and said he missed his fiancée more than he could express, but a friend of Caitlin's said that maybe all was not as it had seemed. Caitlin had confided in her that she was feeling unhappy and trapped and had been for about 6 months. She said that she was sick of his heavy drug use and watching pornography. Things were so bad she admitted she was no longer attracted to him or interested in intimacy, and she was uncomfortable with the kinds of sexual activity John asked her to engage in. He could be jealous and possessive when Caitlin even spoke to other men. The more everyone started sharing stories, it was becoming clearer that Caitlin had well and truly reached the end of the line with their relationship and wanted to move on. John wasn't changing, and she couldn't justify his possessive and mean behaviour anymore. She also felt uncomfortable with John's mom being so involved with everything, and felt things like the credit card was her way of trying to force them to stay together, despite her knowing she wasn't happy. Was it possible she was feeling so trapped she had just wanted to escape? No way, her family said. Not without telling someone something or asking for help. Caitlin was a problem solver and shared everything. The same friend also remembered that just days after she was reported missing, John had referred to her in the past tense several times, which had stood out as odd. But in June 2012, things briefly shifted and their attention was on someone else. 26-year-old Gurpreet Kang had lived right across from Caitlin. He was accused of sexually assaulting a Miami University student, and police wondered if he might have had something to do with Caitlin's case. But after an intense look at him and his whereabouts on that night, Fairfield police ruled him out and they were back at square one. It had now been almost 2 years since she had vanished. Everyone was still keeping her name alive in the media, the reward for information was still growing. And John Carter and Caitlin's family seemed very united. But on April 7th, 2013...
And tonight a major discovery and one of the tri-state's most talked about unsolved...
In a remote wooded area in Indiana, the course of the investigation would take a turn. Human bones were found wrapped in a black plastic construction sheet. Through dental records, they were able to confirm that they were the remains of Caitlin Markham. This was 30 miles away from her home.
Authorities have identified the remains of Caitlin Markham, the woman missing from Fairfield. Her remains were discovered Monday in Cedar Grove, Franklin County, Indiana, on Big Cedar Road.
Well, Clyde, it's certainly not the outcome anybody here in Fairfield was hoping for. And tonight, friends and family of Caitlin Markham know she won't be coming home.
I was just, digging through this little area here, picking up some metal, and here found a jawbone right on the other side of that little tree right there. Right between them two little trees.
At his house, Hicks provided more details about his grisly discovery. He described his call to police after he found Caitlin's remains.
I picked it up and I said, that's not no animal. And I hung in a tree and went and called the cops, and They sent us to the DNR. DNR says, well, what makes you so sure it's a human jawbone? And I said, well, it's got all its teeth and it's shaped just like mine.
Her skull was found separately inside a tied-up plastic bag. There was very little soft tissue, decomposition fluid, or staining inside the bag. The medical examiner said this indicated that her head had not decomposed in the bag, but that it was placed inside after the head had already undergone significant decomposition. The bones had not been buried, they had been dumped with trash piled up on top. There were some cutting wounds on her left wrist caused by sharp force trauma. The wound was described as a V-shape incision that shaved off a layer of the bone, and it was caused by an object. But apart from that, there was nothing to piece together what had actually happened to her. Although her cause of death was not able to be confirmed, they could determine it was a homicide. Her phone was not found nearby. Caitlin's funeral could finally be held. Her art lined the walls and everyone wore bright colours. Many gave speeches, including John.
We would have had our kiss. We would have had our marriage. We would have had our honeymoon. We would have our kid. And we would have our life. And we would grow old together.
Carter's cousin says she considers herself lucky to have called Caitlin family.
Whenever I think of her, I just think of this smile and this artwork, and she was just a colorful human being. She meant well to everybody. Everybody was a friend.
Dave said although this gave them some sort of closure, he was just so sad for Caitlin's younger sister Allie, who was just 15 when her sister disappeared. Some days I get so consumed with Caitlin, her baby sister lost such an important role in her life, he said. Where she had been found presented so many challenges, on top of an already tough case. Her remains were in a different state, and they did not think she was originally put there. Both sets of police teams needed to come together. The start of 2015 began the same as the 2 previous years, quietly and with little movement. The reward for information was now sat at $75,000. But sadly, with the passage of time, Caitlin's case was losing steam.
3 years and the question still remains. Who killed 22-year-old Caitlin Markham?
Dave, Caitlin's father, successfully lobbied the Butler County Sheriff's Office to re-examine the case, and the investigation changed hands from the Fairfield Police Department to the Butler County Sheriff's Office. Things had slowed down to such a point Dave needed fresh eyes and a new approach. He was so scared that his daughter's murder would become a cold case, and he just could not face that prospect. Dave also contacted a private investigator, J. Ryan Green, and he made his way into Caitlin and John's inner circle, interviewing more than a dozen people. 5 of them, excluding John Carter, agreed to take polygraph tests. From this, he narrowed down his investigation to 2 people. He said Subject 1 took a polygraph and failed the polygraph in epic proportion, per the polygraph examiner. A documentary called Taken Too Soon, the Caitlin Markham Story, was also shown at a Springdale movie theatre in the hopes of gathering new leads. Towards the end of 2016, the police announced that they now had a person of interest, but they did not have enough to make an arrest or name them. The private investigator also shared the same view about the exact same person. We now flash forward to 2023, 12 years after Caitlin went missing, and finally the investigation started to pick up pace. The police announced their first arrest.
Could you wind back for me? I do know there's a warrant for you, but I'm not sure exactly what it's for. So they'll be able to explain all that stuff to you when we get there.
A man named Jonathan Palmerton, and he was charged with perjury. Whoever's investigating this now is on the right track. They've got momentum and they have something that would allow a judge to sign off on a search warrant, said Private Investigator Green. Green said Caitlin, John and Jonathan were part of the same circle of friends and knew each other well. He lived close to her too, and John was his best friend. In fact, when John had gone to her house the morning she was reported missing, the first person he had called was Jonathan. Prior to Jonathan Palmerton's arrest, investigators had executed search warrants on 2 separate properties, one where he lived in 2011, the same time Caitlin went missing, and the other was where John Carter had lived at the time with his mother.
Fairfield man accused of lying during the course of Caitlin Markham's death investigation will now face a judge tomorrow.
In the meantime, we're learning new details about his involvement in the case and when prosecutors say he actually committed perjury.
A new timeline starting to become public in the 12-year investigation into the disappearance and death of 21-year-old Caitlin Markham. According to the indictment, on April 21st, 2022, Palmerton lied under oath. Court records show he was indicted almost 6 months later in October. The indictment remains sealed until now.
Jonathan and John Carter were also close to a man named Michael Strauss. A person we've spoken about before on this channel when we covered the case of Ellie Wyke. Michael Strauss pleaded guilty to stalking and murdering Ellie and was sentenced to 17 years to life. Police had been looking at Michael, especially after he made admissions that Ellie was not the first person he had killed. But although there were some links between Caitlin's case and Ellie's, they eventually ruled Michael Strauss out. There was still one person that they kept coming back to after all this time.
Hi, my name is John Carter. My fiance is missing. I can't find her anywhere.
John Carter. Since her remains had been found, John had very much kept out of the media. He was now 36 years old, married and a father. But investigators over the last couple of years especially had gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence against him. His stories had just never made sense, and what he said didn't add up. Over the years, Dave's suspicions had grown too. The two cars the teens had reported seeing driving away from Caitlin's that night were determined to be John's and an unknown vehicle. Both his and Caitlin's phones went dark at around the same time on the night of August the 13th, 2011, and they had also discovered numerous text messages between John and Caitlin between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8:36 p.m. that had been deleted from John's phone, and some texts he claims he sent he never actually did, like his good morning text, for example. John had voluntarily participated in 3 polygraph tests, all of which had showed deception. One in September 2011, one in February 2014, and the final one in January 2021. During his final polygraph, the expert said he specifically showed deceptive responses when asked whether he had disposed of Caitlin's body on Big Cedar Road. The search warrant of his mother's home that was executed saw more than a dozen items seized. This included notes on the investigation, a folder containing Caitlin's school papers, an SD card, and poetry about death and killing. Some of the writings had his name on them, one of which read in part, "Deep down I love her. You ought to kill her, but I love her. She must die. I can't kill her. Yes, you can. No, yes. How do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good. But you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right. About what? Nothing." They also found what they believed was the same material Caitlin's body had been initially wrapped in, and where she was found was just a short way away from a farm owned by the Carter family. Many witnesses had come forward to speak on John's volatility and aggressive nature. A video of him screaming at his current wife holding their child also surfaced.
Taking care of our daughter while you go ahead and do whatever the you want. Yeah, you pushed a load of my buttons, thank you. I want you to stop acting like a
And when detectives put some of the evidence to him, John had little reaction, pointing out it was all circumstantial, an odd choice of phrasing, they thought. Despite his years of denials and pleas for his fiance's safe return, there was now a lot stacked against him, and although they knew it was resting on circumstantial evidence and not DNA or physical evidence, they felt good about presenting it to the district attorney.
Huh? They're coming out the front. He's in custody.
Too far. Greatly appreciate it.
Happy to help.
You want to watch the? Yeah, that's what too.
Forest Park.
You got nothing else on you?
Actually, one more night.
Go both first.
Breaking news right now out of Butler County. The fiance of Caitlin Markham is now in custody and charged in her murder.
In March 2023, the 36-year-old was arrested at his place of work and charged with 2 counts of murder. One count was purposely causing Caitlin's death on or around August 13th or August 14th, and the second murder count alleges he caused her death on the same dates as the proximate result of committing or attempting to commit a violent felony offence. John posted a $1 million bond and, as a condition of his bond, had to wear a GPS monitor. Jonathan Palmerton was also released pending a trial. John Carter pleaded not guilty at his arraignment, and a trial was scheduled for June 2024. Jonathan Palmerton was also scheduled to appear in court charged with perjury. However, his charge was later dismissed. The prosecution subpoenaed more than 50 people. In June 2024, Caitlin's disappearance and murder had been shrouded in mystery for more than a decade. And, after a decade of John denying everything, he changed his plea.
Your Honor, he did, and Mr. Carter, if we may on his behalf, John Carter stipulates that he committed the offense of involuntary manslaughter consistent with Ohio Revised Code 2903.04B. That is a felony of the 3rd degree. Specifically, that on the date specified in the indictment, he did cause the death of Caitlin Markham by the commission of a misdemeanor in the city of Fairfield, Butler County, Ohio.
Dave said it was an out-of-body feeling. He had felt something in his gut about John for a long time, and he said although it was good to know he wasn't going crazy, he was right. It made him so angry that John had lived for 12 years, thinking he had got away with everything.
We knew all along who it was. You just got to be able to grab it. And just proud.
An emotional day in Butler County Court this morning as John Carter pleads guilty, admitting to causing the deaths of his fiancée in 2011.
He stood there at her funeral, hugged and cried with Dave, joined in with the searchers, all knowing full well what had happened. When asked if he could at least admit how everything had happened, he simply muttered, "I cannot." One inmate told detectives that John had in fact revealed how he had killed Caitlin, although John never admitted this in court, and detectives have never heard this version from his mouth.
They broke into an argument. He said before he knew it, he had her pinned down to the ground. He was on top of her, and he choked her. And then after he choked her, he said he was panicking, and he said he didn't know what to do. He was going to call the cops. He didn't want to call the cops. He said he made it look like it was a suicidal gesture, so he cut her wrist.
Although everyone knew the sentencing would be far less, no one was prepared for just how little it would be.
The court imposes the following sentence. Based upon the serious nature of this offense and the factors that have previously been indicated, that anything short of the maximum sentence would demean the seriousness of the offender's conduct and its impact upon the victim, and therefore will impose a definite term of incarceration of 36 months.
John Carter was sentenced to just 3 years in prison, which was the maximum possible for involuntary manslaughter, a felony of the 3rd degree. This sentence will be followed by 3 years of released control. A detective that worked the case said, "I've interviewed from homicides to rapes down to trespasses, 1,000 people, and I've never interviewed a psychopath." And that's what I said when John left. I said that's the first psychopath I've ever interviewed. They could never prove it either, but police and prosecutors had their suspicions about a second person working with John to dispose of her body, and even possibly dismember her. Although Caitlin's family finally had their answer about who was responsible, they still do not know the full story about what happened, and probably never will.
That is why there's no closure. I still do not know the whole story. And not that I would have believed him because he's lied for 13 years, but he's offered no explanation, hasn't even tried. And that just, to me, that just shows his character.
Do you think you'll ever get an explanation?
No, I don't. And even if he writes a confession in prison, he's going to have to be more convincing than he's been the past 13 years.
And in a short while, John will be out of prison and back to living his life. Even though the maximum sentence was given and the judge's hands were tied, The lack of justice for Caitlin is quite staggering and very, very sad. 14 years after she was last seen, Butterflies for Caitlin Markham was held at a park close to her house. Trees were planted and everyone wore things with butterflies on. It was a day filled with art and colour, just what Caitlin loved. Dave said he could be reminded once again that he's not in this alone.
So bright and happy, exuberant, friendly, outgoing. And she liked butterflies, and I don't know, there's been days that I've had bad days in the early on times, and the butterfly would come and fly around me, and I'm like, oh, hi, baby. She was bright, vibrant, coming out of her shell, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
He said living with such a loss and still not knowing what actually happened was all-consuming. Not a day goes by that I do not think of Caitlin. I do not feel 3 years is justice, not for Caitlin, not for her sister, not for me, her friends, or the entire community that has ached and grieved alongside us. I often wonder what she'd be doing with her art and her career. She would be an amazing woman, she had a talent and she was going to go someplace. I'll see a picture of art sometimes and I'll think, that should be Caitlin's up there. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like to support our channel and help us to continue to make content, please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. It helps us so much and we really appreciate it.